So, hi everybody. Again, my name is Agnes Kedmanets. I'm with University of Maryland Extension. I'm the Woodland Stewardship Educator, and we've been doing the Woodland Wildlife Wednesdays since maybe June of last year, and we're going to continue to do them on the third Wednesday of every month for the remainder of the year. So today's webinar is for goodness snakes. So maybe is that hognose snake that you mentioned, Kerry? That's your favorite? So what's your favorite part about that? Just a quick.
Well, I'm going to talk about how it's a drama queen in a little bit.
Oh, interesting. Is that a flat head it have on it there, right there?
Yep. That is a technique that it uses to warn predators.
Interesting. Okay, I don't want to reveal any secrets. Okay, so we'll get more into that in a second. Before we do, I wanted to get through some housekeeping items. So as you may see, the webinar is being recorded. We appreciate that you guys are okay with that. Since you're remaining on the line, that lets us know you're okay with it being recorded. The recording can be found at our website at extension.umd.edu/Woodland. Also, what's going to happen is Taylor, who I didn't introduce yet, she's our roadie. She's in the background letting y'all in from the waiting room. Taylor's going to be sending out an email to y'all that has the webinar recording and some links that Kerry wants to share with y'all. Some of the benefits of registering for the webinar is a free quarterly newsletter called Branching Out. We send that out through email, and if you want to opt out on that, contact Pam. There's her email address at pthomas@umd.edu, and write no events in the email. Kerry already started encouraging us to communicate in the chat box. That's a great thing. So please enter all your questions and comments in the chat box, because then at the end, we will answer all the questions. So Kerry will do her presentation, and then while she's going through it, please ask all questions in the chat box, and then we will go through those questions at the end. So our next month, I wanted to let you know about our next month's presentation is going to be Track Signs and Stories of Maryland Insects. That might already be in your wood. That's going to be put on by Dr. Karen Berghart. We're excited to have her do some presentations about Maryland native insects and what their benefits are, and a few stories of them. I also wanted to let you know, hey, do you know somebody that's curious about trees and forests that's between 14 and 18? We're starting a 4-H forestry club. There was one many years ago here in Maryland, but we're resurrecting it. We're making a hybrid model of it. So it's going to be virtual with minimal field components that are going to be following CDC guidelines, so that while we're gathering together, we're safe about it. If you have any questions, you can feel free to get in touch with me, Agnes Kedmanets, or you can check out that website there, or that link there. I think that takes you to registration. I don't really think that takes it very further, but talk to me if you know anybody that's curious. Call me and we can chat about how that works, and I can send you some more information about it. If you do want to find out about that 4-H Forestry Invitational, that's the culminating event, is a national contest, and that's you can Google that 4-H Forestry Invitational. It's in West Virginia every year, so that's the culminating. That's what we want. We want to train these participants, let them learn about the forest and trees, and then have some good old-fashioned competition with a state competition, and then with a national contest. So getting right into it. So here we are. Today's presentation is for goodness snakes, and snakes are fascinating yet highly misunderstood creatures. Learn the basics about snake biology, why we should care about snakes, and information on several of the snake species that call Maryland home. From the secretive and colorful rainbow snake to the social timber rattlesnake, Maryland snake species are highly diverse. I'm looking forward to what Kerry is going to tell us about. And Kerry, Wixted is the education and outreach specialist for Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Wildlife and Heritage Service. She runs several statewide education programs, such as Wild Acres for backyard habitat enthusiasts. She does, I think, 2 monthly sessions for that Wild Acres program. So if you're interested in that, there's her email right there that you can get hooked up with any of her programs. She'd be happy to have you join. I do want to say too, if you've been looking in that chat box, you know that chat box at the bottom of your screen there that looks like a talking bubble. There's a link there at the very top of that chat conversation that leads us to some information that Kerry wants us to have about snakes. But we're going to send that out to you also with the recording when this presentation is done. So I'm from the Eastern Shore. I'm from Talbot County. Kerry, what county do you live in?
I'm in Anne Arundel.
Anne Arundel. So what region do you all live in? We want to see what region y'all live in. Taylor's going to be bringing up a quick poll here. We want to see where you're from. I am from the Eastern Maryland region. I work at the Y Research and Education Center in Queenstown, but I live in Oxford. And Kerry, I think you work also in Anne Arundel County.
Mm-hmm.
In Annapolis, I think.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you guys. So Central Maryland, hello everybody. Central Maryland's representing today. Hello everybody that's outside of Maryland. Welcome to everybody. We're excited to have you here. And then I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Kerry, if you want to take over, we're excited to hear your presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Agnes. I'm really excited to be here. I appreciate the invitation. I always jump at the invite to talk about snakes or other misunderstood species. So my name again is Kerry Wixted, and I work within the Wildlife and Heritage Service with the Department of Natural Resources. So in the overall umbrella of the department, we manage the state's wildlife resources, the ducks and the bucks and everything else in between, including our snakes. And one of my programs, as Agnes mentioned, is Wild Acres, which is all about backyard wildlife habitat and how to support our local species within our backyard ecosystems. So I'm going to talk to you today about snakes, and I figured I'd start with some snake trivia. So first question, and don't worry, they're all true or false, so you get a 50-50 shot here. True or false, water moccasins, aka cottonmouths, occasionally can be found in Maryland. True or false? So why don't you type that in the chat, true or false? All right, good. It looks like most of the responses are false, and that is right. So Maryland does not have any confirmed records of water moccasins, aka cottonmouths. They're highly misidentified, and oftentimes our northern water snakes and sometimes our copperheads or other snake species are accidentally identified as water moccasins. So this is a map of the water moccasin or cottonmouth distribution. As you can see, the northernmost populations are all the way down there in southern Virginia, southeast Virginia, essentially. So they're not anywhere close to Maryland, and we got a long time, thankfully, before they get here, but they're not as concerning as they're often portrayed. So even if they do become part of Maryland's fauna, it's not a big concern at the moment. So no cottonmouths, even with a 5-year intensive reptile and amphibian atlas. We found lots of other species here in Maryland, including some accidentally introduced species like a couple alligators that people might have released and things like that, but no water moccasins were uncovered in that survey. All right, true or false? To treat a snake bite, cut the area of the bite and suck out the venom. Let's see this. What do you think? True or false? Good. So it is false. So if you are bitten by a snake and you're not sure if it's venomous or not, try your best to stay calm. I know it can be concerning. And then you want to call 911 immediately, or the Maryland Poison Control Center. They also have staff that are available and able to evaluate snake bite conditions and all of that. So taking off anything that might be constricting that area and essentially getting yourself to the hospital are some of the biggest things you should do. You don't want to constrict the area at all, and you certainly don't want to try to cut that area and inflict any further damage. So good. All right, last question, or no, second to last question. True or false, some Maryland snakes are poisonous. Some Maryland snakes are poisonous. True or false? We got a false with capital letters there. Somebody feels strongly about that. All right. So this is a bit of a vocabulary term. So there's a difference between poison and venom. We have two venomous snakes in Maryland, but no poisonous snakes in Maryland. And the difference is poisonous is if you eat it and you get sick, that's a poisonous animal. If it bites you and you get sick, that's a venomous animal. So venom is injected, poison is ingested. So I always joke, just don't eat our local snakes and you should be good. Now, there are some snakes out there in the wild that are both poisonous and venomous, but not to my knowledge here in Maryland. All right, last trivia before we get into that information about our snakes. True or false, copperheads and rat snakes interbreed to produce hybrid species of venomous snakes. True or false? Copperheads and rat snakes interbreed. There's a picture. Good. It's false. So sometimes the copperheads and rat snakes will hang out together, particularly in wintertime when they go through their brumation. But they are completely different species and completely different families, and they're unable to interbreed. So there's no way that they can interbreed to produce a hybrid at all. Just doesn't fit together. So that's some snake trivia to get you started. And as Agnes mentioned, snakes are highly misunderstood animals. And I will admit that back in the day, I used to be terrified of snakes myself. So I still have a little bit of that lingering fear, particularly when large snakes are close by. So, it's that natural reaction sometimes to some of those wildlife species. But the more I learn about wildlife and snakes, the more I appreciate them and really just love what they do for ecosystems. So our snakes function both as predators and prey. So some of our smaller snake species become meals for things like raptors and eagles and hawks and all of that. And certainly a lot of our snake species are out there helping control things like rodent populations. And on the backhand, sometimes controlling those rodent populations also help with tick populations. And one study out of the University of Maryland found that rattlesnakes eating tick-laden mice took around several thousand ticks out of the population each year by eating those mice that had those ticks on them. So that has a really important ecological value and also human health value in that regard. The other cool thing about snakes is the medicinal value, particularly for those snakes that have that venom. So enalapril is a blood pressure medication, and it's an ACE inhibitor that actually is modeled after pit viper venom. So pit vipers include species like our copperheads. So we have that blood pressure medicine thanks to snakes. It also can be used, some of their venom can also be used to treat things like strokes or Alzheimer's disease. Venom can be useful to help with blood clotting for patients on blood thinners, particularly during surgery. And one cool thing with copperhead venom, it has this special compound, it's hard to say, it's contortrostatin, and it actually inhibits tumor growth and metastasis, particularly of breast cancer. So it's not in clinical trials yet, but several years ago, they found that this compound in the Copperhead venom might actually be something useful to help with breast cancer cures. So really fascinating stuff there. Another thing that I found really interesting is that some snakes can also function as seed dispersal agents. And going back to those rattlesnakes, and this just blows my mind, but apparently rattlesnakes can eat mice and other rodents that might have grains or other types of fruits in their guts. And when they excrete what's left of that rodent, essentially, that can germinate. So they found that things that went through the gut of a rattlesnake were actually able to germinate. So rattlesnakes can help with seed dispersal. And in the link, essentially, it has some information on that study and what they found. So really fascinating in that regard. It brings my two loves of plants and snakes together there. And I see a question about snakes caught in the wild, milked, or their farms. I'm not quite sure. I believe there are facilities that they use to extract the venom from captive snakes to use for snake bite antidotes. So, I believe that, but I'm not 100% sure. All right, so let's talk about the anatomy of a snake. All of our snakes are what are known as obligate carnivores, aka they eat meat. So they eat other organisms. This includes invertebrates. It can include vertebrates like fish and mammals and birds, sometimes other snakes. It really depends on the species and if it can fit, right? They have a lot of vertebrae too, and that allows them to be able to maneuver around really easily. So they have anywhere from 100 to over 400 vertebrae in their body. And just to give you a comparison with humans, we've got about 33 vertebrae in our bodies. So they've got significantly more, and that's why they're so much more flexible. Internally, they have one long lung and one smaller lung. And this is designed so when they eat a large object, essentially, that long lung can be pushed to the side and not be constricted as that object is going through their digestive tract. They don't have any external ears or eyelids, and actually the skin over their eyes is covered by scales. So when they shed their skin, they shed that skin on those eyes as well. Now, you might see them a lot sticking their tongues out and flicking their tongues. And usually this is that action that sets a lot of people on edge, essentially. And this is not really a snake defensive tactic, but it is a snake that's trying to figure out the environment around it. You see, they have this forked tongue, and the tongue is very important for sensing the air around them. So they're tasting the air. So the tongue is forked, and actually on one side can figure out what's happening to the left of them, and the other side's what's happening to the right. And when they pull it back in, the top of their mouth has this organ called the Jacobson's organ, which is used for essentially, that sensory input that they're getting from their environment. So when they do a lot of that tongue flicking, that's them trying to figure out what's around me, is there a potential threat? Is there something delicious nearby? It's essentially them trying to understand what's around them. So. And the second lung, Marilyn, is right by the first, but it just gets pushed in there. So it's just a lot smaller. And the fat bodies are there just like how we have fat bodies to be able to store fat and survive off of that. So. All right, so let's talk about bites and venom, because this is usually the biggest concern that a lot of people have. And around the United States, there are anywhere from 7,000 to 8,000 bites per year, and only 5 to 6 deaths per year. So, the chances of dying from a snake bite here in the United States and in Maryland are really, really low. And when you look at the numbers of the people who are bitten by venomous snakes, and also in terms of those who die from those bites, almost a quarter of the deaths from venomous snakes are from people intentionally handling those snakes. either handling those snakes in religious ceremonies, handling those snakes like venomous snakes such as cobras and things like that that might be acquired through the pet trade. A lot of times somebody is physically touching that snake, and that's why the snake feels so threatened that it has to deliver a potent amount of venom. In addition, the venom isn't always the primary cause for death. So some of these deaths, it's a secondary. You know, essentially people are bitten by these snakes that have the venom, and then they might have a heart attack or something else. So that is something to consider there. The venom is comprised of neurotoxins, hemotoxins, and some snakes also have cytotoxins. So as the name suggests, neurotoxins react with the nervous system, the hemotoxins react with the blood, and cytotoxins react with the blood. With cells. The copperhead is the most common venomous snake in Maryland to bite, but it also has the least toxic venom compared to the rattlesnake, our other venomous snake here in Maryland. When snakes bite, they have these fangs, at least for the venomous species that we have here. And those fangs actually have a groove in it. And so I used to think that they were actively pushing that venom into the bite victim. But essentially, when they bite, there's a lot of physics that happen, and it uses surface tension from that groove that pulls the venom down into the wounds. And snakes can determine how much venom to deliver in terms of how much of a threat they're being exposed to. So if they are just slightly concerned, they can deliver just a small amount of venom. But if they feel like they're really about to die or really, really threatened, then they can deliver it all. The reason that they meter their venom is because it's found in this venom gland, and it takes a lot of energy to produce venom, and they can't just, quickly re-up their venom after they've delivered it. So it's energetically costly, and it takes time to produce venom. So that's why snakes are very careful about their venom usage and usually have some other ways to avoid using their venom, either by trying to get away from the potential threat or using other techniques and things like that to subdue their prey. Now, I have this picture of the opossum down here because it's really fascinating. Opossums can eat venomous snakes. And so they eat those venomous snakes, and they are immune to snake venom. So researchers are looking at ways to create take possum proteins to make snake bite antidotes that might be easier and cheaper to produce than the traditional routes that are currently being employed. So kind of cool there. Jim, I see your question about disfiguration from snake bites. I don't have data on that, so sorry. All right, so as I mentioned, we have two venomous snake species here in Maryland. The more common of the two is the copperhead, and then we also have the timber rattlesnake that's found out about. So when we look at these venomous snakes, what are some clues that tell you a snake is venomous here in Maryland? And I'm saying in Maryland because these clues don't always work outside of Maryland. So what are some things that you would look for to know if a snake is venomous or not here in Maryland? See eye, flat head, the eye. Any other guesses? We got the eye and the head, heart-shaped head. Yeah. Color. Oh, Brenda. And triangular head. Good. All right. So yes, the head is one character for our Maryland venomous snakes. They are both in the pit viper family, and they have these larger kind of flattened out heads. But one thing to know about that trait is that some of our non-venomous snakes are actually going to try to mimic those venomous snakes by flattening out their head. If you remember what Agnes showed you earlier with the eastern hognose snake, and it had that flattened hood, that was exactly what it was doing. It was trying to puff out its head to make itself look bigger. The elliptical pupils are also helpful. So our venomous snakes have those slit-like pupils like a cat compared to round pupils like we do, which are found in our non-venomous snakes. But this can also change so that pupil size can change depending on that light that snake is receiving. The other thing is that both of our snakes here in Maryland that are venomous are pit vipers. And that means they have a nostril for smelling, but they also have a heat sensing pit. So they have 2 holes on the side of their face that, that tells you that they're in that pit viper family. If you want to get real up close and personal with your snakes, you can also flip them over and look at the undercarriage and look at those anal plate scales. A single row of scales after that anal plate means that you're looking at a venomous snake. But if you see double rows, then you know you're looking at a non-venomous snake. I always tell folks, though, you really should know if a snake is a venomous or not before you flip it over and look at its underside, particularly around its bum region. So you might think that this is an interesting trait to look at, but this is actually really helpful if you're finding snake skins in the house. You can look wherever that anal plate is and seeing if it's divided or single the rest of the way down the tail to find out if it's a non-venomous snake or a venomous snake that has been visiting maybe your house or your garage. So most of the time it's our non-venomous rat snakes that are doing the visiting. Honestly, though, out of all of these traits, the best thing really is to learn the color characteristics of our venomous snakes here in Maryland. So our copperheads have this very distinct banding pattern that looks like a Hershey kiss on the side. So it's constricted at the top and gets bigger at the bottom, just like a Hershey kiss. When you're looking straight down on it, it looks like it has bow ties on it. So that's the character for our copperheads, and obviously our rattlesnakes have a rattle, and you can't really see that on this one, but they do have that rattle, and they will let you know if you're getting too close. So let's try venomous or not. We've got 3 snake species, A, B, and C. So out of the 3, tell me which one you think is venomous. Are 2 venomous or all 3 venomous? So you got 1 vote for C, 1 for A. A. A vote for B. Another for A. All right. Good job. A is the correct answer out of all 3 of these. So you can see this pupil's a little wider. This is a juvenile copperhead right here. So it has a little wider pupil, probably because of the light conditions that it was in. If you do look, though, you can see that Hershey kiss banding pattern and then that ribbon or bow tie looking right down. A lot of times this also confuses people. And this right here, this bright yellow piece is called a caudal lore. And that's C-A-U-D-A-L. And that essentially is found on juvenile copperheads. They flick this bright yellow tail around and they attract skinks, which is one of the foods they like to eat at this stage in their life. So this is the only difference physically that you'll see between an adult and juvenile copperhead. They have basically the same color patterns as they age. They just lose that bright yellow tail in favor for better camouflage. B is actually a water snake, and this one I took this picture from online. This is a banded water snake, but you can see him puffing out his head. So this is something a lot of water snakes do as if they feel threatened, just to mimic those venomous snakes. And this is why a lot of times those water snakes are inadvertently killed because people think that they are those venomous snakes. If you look closely, though, he has these dark vertical lines, these lip stripes, and that's one way to tell our water snakes here in Maryland. They all have those dark vertical lip stripes. You won't see that on the copperheads. They've got kind of a whitish, lighter colored lip. C is my favorite snake in Maryland, and that is our hognose snake. So this one is puffing out its head and trying to look like a cobra. So it's a very flat head. It doesn't have that big bulbous head on a tiny little neck. And if you look closely, it also has a little pointed pig nose, which is important when it goes to look for toads, which are its favorite food. So I'll talk about them in a little bit. Around the world, there are over 3,700 species of snakes, and they are not in places like Ireland, not because of St. Patrick, but because of the glaciers. And also, you won't find them in northern Canada and Alaska. So that's something to consider, that we don't have snakes in these extremely cold environments. Around the world, snakes aren't very threatened or endangered overall as a group, but I will say that a lot of research for snakes isn't heavily funded, just because they're not really species that a lot of people like. So just to start with some cool snakes around the world before we jump into Maryland snakes, one of my favorite snakes in North America is the Indigo Snake. They have this gorgeous dark black appearance and then this bright rusty coloration in the face. They're the longest native snake in North America. They can get around, I think, 70 to 80 inches in length, and they are a threatened species. So they're not found in Maryland. They're found in the Southeast in places like Georgia and Florida, and they have a very specialized relationship with gopher tortoises. They use gopher tortoise burrows essentially to be able to live with them. So this species has declined due to decline of habitat, particularly the loss of gopher tortoises in the areas. And it's also declined due to the pet trade. Long time ago, these snakes were also used when in circuses as for the snake dances, because they're very docile type snakes and large and beautiful snakes. So that's not something that really happens now. And some states are actually working on reintroduction programs for indigo snakes to kind of bring them back in areas where the gopher tortoises have rebound. There are also some snakes that are semi-aquatic, and this banded sea crate is found over in Southeast Asia. It can actually hold its breath for 15 to 30 minutes. It likes to eat eels in these coral reef ecosystems, and it has specialized salt glands to allow it to live in essentially a marine environment. It has extremely lethal venom, but it rarely bites. And that's, essentially most of the bites happen when fishermen accidentally catch these in their nets and they're trying to get them out of the nets. It also has a paddle-like tail, so it's really designed for an aquatic life. So really cool species. In Maryland, we have about 27 species of snakes, and 5 of them are rare. And one of them, the northern pine snake, is considered to be historic in the state. So we have a good number of snakes, and I'm going to talk about some of the more common ones that you might find here in the state. So one of them is the garter snake, and this has a very variable appearance. So this is the garter snake that has more of that long line down its body. It also has those vertical lip stripes, kind of like what you would see with those water snakes there. This is a terrestrial snake. It likes to eat invertebrates like millipedes and spiders and worms, and it also eats a lot of amphibians. So salamanders are a #1 prey item for this species. It actually gives birth live, so it has a live birth, and it's a very common snake that you will find in backyards and woodlands and places like that. So I took this photo a couple years ago at Susquehanna State Park out in Harford County, Maryland. So this is a very common snake species that you will see, and it's a medium-sized snake in terms of the rest of our snakes that we have around. One of our prettier snake species that we have are the rough green snakes. We have rough green snakes and we have smooth green snakes, but smooth green snakes are a bit rarer in the state. So these are actually pretty common, but they're not often seen. And I don't know if anybody has had the good fortune of seeing a green snake, so you feel free to type in the chat if you've seen one before. But they spend most of their time up in trees, so they're considered to be arboreal species, and they eat insects. And just look at that gorgeous face. I was very lucky a couple years ago at Jug Bay Wetlands Sanctuary to watch one of these go out and hunt. It was on the ground in the leaf litter, and it took its body and slowly hit the leaves. And as it rattled the leaves, that caused things like crickets and other invertebrates to jump up, and then it was snatching them out. So I probably sat there on the ground for a good 30 minutes watching this snake just sit there and hunt in all the leaf litter. And it's another important reason of why leaf litter is so important for a number of species, because it houses those invertebrates and also helps provide habitat for species like this. I see a few folks have also had the good fortune of seeing a green snake. They can really look like a small green branch just across the trail. The last one that I saw in Prince George's County looked just like that, and then it moved and I was like, oh, it's a snake. So the Decay's brown snake is one of our smaller snake species, just like the ringneck snake that we have here too. So Decay's brown snake used to be known as the northern brown snake. So you might have heard that name as well. It's mostly brown in appearance, and it has these paired black dots on its back. This one is a juvenile, what we call neonate, or just recently hatched. And you see that light neck stripe there, that's telling me that it's a juvenile. But they don't get much bigger than this, even as the adult form. So this species loves to eat invertebrates, and sometimes it will find its way into basements, particularly if you've got things like silverfish and centipedes and stuff like that. They will come in and find their ways indoors to help with some of those invertebrates that are running around in your house. So I usually, if I do find them back in my laundry room, I just gently place them back outside in a wood pile. And they only get, I think, around 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches. So they're not a very big snake at all. And they're pretty docile as well. The northern ringneck snake, I find a lot of times under rocks. We used to split the ringneck snake into the northern and the southern based on this band that they have there, that ring, whether it is in 2 pieces or 1. But now we've lumped them together as one species. They have this gorgeous slaty blue gray appearance on top, and then this bright orange belly underneath. But you usually don't see that. A lot of times you just see the upper part of the snake. So this is another snake that feeds off of a lot of invertebrates that are found in yards and things like that. So these are great to have around in gardens because they're out there helping with pest control. So I see a question from Brenda that she has ringneck snakes that nest by her foundation. Do they revisit nest or build new? I'm not sure about ringneck snakes, but a lot of snakes do have that kind of what we call site fidelity. So if they're using that area and they've had success there, they often return to it. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to our rat snakes, which are very common in backyards across Maryland and in a lot of areas. So these are a bigger snake than what I've been talking about so far. And if you haven't been, following all the taxonomy with snakes right now, this is a big, big upset that's happening. And depending on whether you're a lumper or splitter, you might be losing or gaining friends in the snake world. So back in the day, we used to have 6 different subspecies of rat snakes. And in Maryland, our subspecies was the eastern rat snake that we had here. And then as you went south, they had yellow rat snakes. And then down in Florida, they had some specialized subspecies that were very distinct. And I'll show you pictures of them in a second. So there were 6 known subspecies. And then there was some DNA technology or DNA studies that were done. And it showed that these species were distinct from their Asian cousins. So they changed the genus name, which is okay, right? But then it also revealed that these different subspecies that we were classifying basically by physical characteristics were actually not different. So essentially, these subspecies were their own species, and they were just broken up by geography. So here in Maryland, if you're east of the Continental Divide and you find what you think is a rat snake, it's probably an eastern rat snake. If you're west of the Continental Divide, it might be a gray rat snake, or, you know, right there, that appellation there. So everything along the eastern seaboard would be eastern rat snake. There is some overlap of uncertainty. Everything between the Appalachians and the Mississippi, I think, would be the gray rat snake, and then everything west of that would be the western rat snake. And I will show you why this has caused a lot of upset. Because these three subspecies, what was the Florida Everglades rat snake, the yellow rat snake, and the eastern rat snake that we have here, are all now considered to be the eastern rat snake. So they have all been lumped together. And so this is where we get a lot of heartburn, and we get questions of whether we should be separating these species based on the genetic makeup of these species, or should we continue to keep them separate based on their physical and ecological needs? For example, the Everglades rat snake, when they come out of the egg, when they hatch, they actually are attracted to lizards and not to rodents. So, but our eastern rat snakes are much more primed to go and eat rodents when they hatch. It's kind of instinctual for them to do that. So then it gets really, really sticky. And so I'm going to leave it up to you to determine whether you want to lump or split your rat snakes. But I have a link to that more detailed information about the rat snake debate in the resources that I shared on the Wakelet, and I'll put that back in the chat there for you. So the eastern rat snake juvenile is often a case of mistaken identity because the juvenile looks very different from the adult. So that adult is that black with just a little bit of cream on its underside by its face. And the juvenile actually has this grayish pattern with these checkered board kind of patterns down the back. It also has this black band between the eyes. This is a good identification character. The other thing to look at is the tip of its tail is not bright yellow. A lot of people mistakenly think these eastern rat snake juveniles are copperhead juveniles, and they kill them, especially because these eastern rat snakes love our mulch piles in our backyard and often lay their eggs in those nice warm mulch piles. So it's just something to keep in mind about this rat snakes and the copperheads. And one of the documents on our resource sheet actually shows you the differences between adults and juveniles for these different snake species. So, so you can discern the differences. All right, so let's play Copperhead or Water Snake. Copperhead or Water Snake. So out of A and B, which one is the Copperhead? A and B, which one is the Copperhead? See if you were paying attention earlier. Awesome. It looks unanimous. B it is. Yes. So, so the banding patterns on water snakes, I didn't show you this earlier, but they have irregular banding patterns. Sometimes the bands go all the way down. Sometimes they're mismatched. Sometimes they don't go all the way up, and sometimes they will actually have an inverted Hershey kiss, where it's wider at the top and then gets skinnier at the base. So, and then again, those dark lip stripes and that round pupil there. So, so I think it was Brenda earlier who said she didn't want to get close. You can see these characters from a distance. So you see that bow tie right there, and then you should also see that Hershey kiss pattern, skinny at the top, wide at the base. Okay, good. All right, A and B, which one's the Copperhead? A and B, which one is the Copperhead? Copperheads can go in water, but you really don't see copperheads in water. They're much more of an upland snake species. All right, so you are correct. A is our Copperhead. So you see that nice Hershey kiss pattern, right? Hershey kisses, right? This is a darker Copperhead. This one's a water snake. This one I found it at Jug Bay Wetland Sanctuary. So it was really muddy and you couldn't really see the banding patterns, but you can see those dark vertical lip stripes right there. So, so again, this is a way to tell the difference between these species. And just really quick about our copperheads, looking at that banding pattern, very important. They are a species that essentially likes to camouflage itself within the leaf litter because it's an ambush predator. So it is something that it does to be able to catch its food. So interestingly enough, the Susquehannock Wildlife Society up in Hartford County recently did a study, and they called it Don't Tread on Me, an examination of anti-predatory behavior of the eastern copperhead. So essentially they looked at 69 different copperheads out in the wild across Maryland and looked at their reactions based on once they were first found, once they were stepped next to, once they were stepped on, and once they were picked up. And this was just looking at the aggressiveness of copperheads. And what they found was really interesting. So out of those 69 copperheads that they found, 15 fled as soon as they were found. So they essentially got out of Dodge and they couldn't be tested. So they were able to test 51 of them. And out of the 51 tests, essentially only 2 of those 51 snakes bit, even with being picked up and stepped on. Only 2 of them bit. So this goes to show that they're a very non-confrontational species, even with increasing threat levels. Now, I'm not telling you to go step on copperheads or pick them up. Generally, I don't like to pick up a lot of snakes just because it stresses them out. We're big and scary. Even if they're not a venomous snake species, it still stresses them out when we handle them. So this is just hopefully some information to help quell some of your fears about copperhead bites. And a lot of times bites are accidental. So, people get too close or step in a hole, or a dog sticks its nose in a hole where a copperhead's hiding and it feels threatened in it, and that's why it might bite. They are capable of giving dry bites, or AKA bites without venom, but if you don't know, like you can't tell the difference. So if you've been bitten by a copperhead, essentially call 911, call poison control, and go and get medical attention right away. The other thing that I'm going to talk about with eastern copperheads, which is relevant to right now, is that they are a big fan of cicadas, like many of other species too. So it's been well documented that copperheads love to gorge on cicadas, particularly those periodical cicadas that are going to be busting out in this year in Maryland. So up in Connecticut, they found a really high amount of reproduction, obviously, following a cicada outbreak in Connecticut. But then 5 years after that, they had a drought, and the drought resulted in less pregnancy of the females. And this is interesting because it could be how this, it could uncover clues of how this species might react to climate change, essentially with changing weather patterns and precipitation and all that. It could affect reproduction of species like copperheads. All right, my favorite snake, Eastern Hognose Snake. We're winding down here. So this is a species that is highly variable in appearance. So it can be all black, it can be dark phase, it could also be this bright orange and black, looks like a Halloween snake. You can see that cute little pig nose. So again, it uses that pig nose to dig through sandy soils to find its favorite food, which is toads. And grabs those toads. It has rear-facing fangs. So they are mildly venomous, but they can't really bite people. So we don't consider them to be medically significant because those rear-facing fangs are designed to grab onto big old juicy toads and hold them and secure them as they eat them. So they will flatten out their heads when they feel threatened and try to look like a cobra. But usually their defense mechanism is to be a drama queen and to play dead. They literally will go through this writhing motion and flip themselves upside down, stick out their tongue and say, "I'm dead." And the cutest thing is when you get these juveniles and they keep moving because they haven't quite perfected their death posture yet. And you just sit there and giggle at them. So There's a video of this in the Wakelet. If you click on that link, you can watch the Oscar-worthy performance of our hognose snakes. They like sandy soil too, so you don't find them often in most of Maryland unless you have that nice sandy soil. So the timber rattlesnake is a species that actually used to be common across the state, but it's now rare. And that's due to high persecution of the species. And we actually, because they are social and they communally den in winter and sometimes communally breed in certain areas, we don't disclose those locations just because people will go in there and just persecute them. And all snakes in Maryland are protected under the Non-Game and Endangered Species Act. So it technically is illegal to kill a snake in Maryland, including things like rattlesnakes. So rattlesnakes are really important because their #1 prey item is deer mice. And if you follow things like Lyme disease, deer mice is one of the #1 vectors of carrying Lyme disease and the ticks that carry Lyme disease, essentially. So the more deer mice that they eat, the less of that problem with the ticks and Lyme disease that we have in our ecosystems. So they can live 10 to 20 years. They have live birth in August and September. They have a communal den this time of year. And they also have this really fascinating mating dance that the male does to attract the females. And so you can look that up online, but it's a really cool technique that he uses for courtship. There can be light-phased rattlesnakes in Maryland and dark-phased rattlesnakes in Maryland. And they do get more buttons on their rattles as they age, but the aging them by their rattles is not always reliable just because sometimes they break off and have to start it all over again. Last snakes I'm going to talk about are some of our rarer snakes, the scarlet snake and the rainbow snake. This is an uncommon species that you can find in the coastal plain of Maryland, so on the western shore and on the eastern shore. And in that amphibian and reptile atlas, just to show you how uncommon this species is, there was only one found during that 5-year survey effort. So it lives mostly underground and it eats reptile eggs. Red touches black, you're all right, Jack. So it mimics that venomous coral snake, which is found to the south of us. It's not found here in Maryland. But you're really lucky if you see one, and let us know if you ever do see one. It's quite a sight, and it's a species I would love to see one day. Another gorgeous snake that we have is the rainbow snake, and this is found down in Charles County, and this is a specialized predator of eels. It has this beautiful iridescent red, yellow, and black appearance, and it very rarely is found except on roadways on rainy nights, sometimes right around time when the eel are running and things like that. So this picture was taken by George Jett down in Charles County, and I'm highly jealous of him seeing it. So this is an endangered species here in Maryland. So if you find one, let us know. We would love to know. So winding down with snakes, when we think about snakes, you might not think about some of the diseases and our impacts on snakes, but we do have an emerging disease called snake fungal disease that's affecting snakes in our area. It causes localized thickening and crusting of the skin around the face and the eyes, and sometimes they just starve out. You can see an extremely emaciated snake here with all of those lesions. We're seeing it predominantly in water snakes, king snakes, racers, and ringnecks, and mostly down on the coastal plain. So if you ever see a snake that has this beat up, crusty skin and you see sort of lesions like that, if you could take pictures of it, and send it to us, to the Department of Natural Resources, that would be helpful to let us know about the spread of this disease. So it can be treated with an antifungal, but treatment with antifungals has not been found to be successful. And one of the ways that it gets moved around is by on our hands and on our gear. So this is a reason why we shouldn't move around snakes, why we should limit handling them and making sure we're properly sanitizing our hands and even things like our boots and stuff like that before going out to these places. So if you send it into the customer service at DNR, that I'll put that link in the chat at the end, but that would be where to report it. So snake conservation includes lots of education and hopefully busting myths about snakes and promoting how awesome they are, because they are really important for a lot of our ecosystems. And I hope you got that from this presentation, how they can help your woodlands and our different wildlife. So if you want to help them out, some of the things that you can help them in your backyards and on your habitats is just considering reducing pesticide use, because a lot of them are eating invertebrates and they can consume those invertebrates that have been that have been affected by pesticides. So that can be a problem. Glue traps, ditch them. I hate these things so much. So this was a poor little juvenile rat snake. We had to pull off a glue trap. This happens a lot of time because he sees all those juicy camel crickets there and he's like, oh, I got some dinner. And then he gets stuck. And it's the worst thing ever trying to pull them off. And we get a lot of wrens that also get stuck on them and other animals. So glue traps are terrible. Just get rid of them. So bird netting is also a problem for snakes. And this one was a photo that was taken by Jane Burgess, our wildlife response biologist, of 2 mating copperheads that got stuck in bird netting. So this had to be taken to the zoo to have them safely removed from the netting. And unfortunately, one of them died in the process. So it's very common to have snakes get stuck in this type of fencing. You don't want to have those flexible holes on that. You want a really fine mesh or a big mesh on your netting, and you don't want it to be very flexible. And even like the burlap netting has been found to be problematic for those species. So if you want snake habitat or if you don't want snake habitat, these are things that they're attracted to. Wood piles. Snakes love wood piles. Don't have them close to your foundation if you don't want snakes coming into your house. Same thing goes with rock piles. Those are excellent snake habitat. If you don't want snakes nearby, get rid of your rock piles. And then again, those mulch piles. You get that mulch drop off in the spring, and if you don't spread it out and put it out very quickly, and you just leave it there to kind of rot and release heat, it's going to be perfect snake breeding habitat. And some people want that. So just keep that in mind. Unintended snake habitat, unfinished stonework. If you've got this unfinished stonework that's not like grouted and patched up, all those holes are simulating a nice rock pile, and they don't know it's your outdoor kitchen versus a natural rock pile, right? So just keep that in mind. Make sure you're removing any spaces that they can squeeze into and use if you're putting those rock structures out there. Same thing goes with dense foundation plantings. Don't plant it so close to the house because it's providing that cover for things like rodents that's also bringing in the snakes. And if you are in a big bird fan and you have bird nests out, bird houses out, put up predator guards, because if you don't put up those predator guards, you're just going to feed the snakes. And I mean, snakes got to eat too, but we shouldn't make it too easy for them, right? So for more information, you can check out that Wakelet link. It has a lot of these links on there, and I will add a few more that have come up within the conversation today, including that customer service number to contact about rare species and also snake fungal disease. And I'm right there at the end, but I'm available for questions too. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kerry. That was an interesting, informative snake presentation. Thank you for making me less scared of venomous snakes. That study that you showed about how much they actually bite was helpful and informative. You know, when I was in forestry school, we were told when we're traipsing through the woods, you don't want to be the second one in line because the first person's going to wake the snake. The second person in line is going to get bitten by the snake. So this report that you sent us, the study that you sent us, tells me they probably wouldn't have bit me anyway. So that's great.
Yeah, they're very, very shy species and all of that. So they'd much rather not engage with us. And there are some species like the northern water snakes. They can be a little testy. But they're not venomous. And usually you just need to give them space like everything else.
Right. I actually shared my screen, but I kind of want to just leave your screen up if you could, just so your contact information is there. You did a great job going through the questions. So let's see if there's any questions. There's a lot of platitudes, and that they're grateful that you did it. Any simple explanation as to why some of these snakes are live bearers and some are egg layers? Oh, I see. So
Oh, that's a
why do you,
good question. And I don't know exactly why. It could be the environments that they're in and the amount of care that's required too. So I know like the timber rattlesnakes are live, give live birth. And sometimes the young hang around with the female for a bit. So it could be that process there.
interesting, interesting. Steve asked, is deer fencing okay when you were talking about snakes getting caught in fences?
Yes, so deer fencing, if it's like the larger, like I have fencing around some of my smaller shrubs that's got a really large diameter and it's not flexible. It's like that coated wire. So if you have something like that, that it's big enough for a snake to get in and out, but not big enough for a deer to get in and out. It really depends on the size of the mesh and then its flexibility. So.
Great, great. So I just want to let everybody know too that the link that Kerry mentioned where her resources are, she called it the Wizlet. Is that what you called it?
Wakelet.
Wakelet. She put that link there. Don't be scared of it. It's actually super easy. So she put that link there if you want to get to that. I'm seeing it's the top of the hour. I feel that we just have a few more questions. Why don't we plug on through, Kerry? You want to answer some of these questions and go on through?
I can stick around for a few more questions. So Lisa, the northern pine snake.
I just want to say, take it easy to everybody that has to go at the 1 o'clock hour. I really appreciate you guys joining. Don't forget, next month is the Woodland Wildlife Wednesdays. We're going to do insects. And don't forget, hey, I'm putting in another plug. The 4-H Forestry Club is starting next month. So if you have a 14 to 18-year-old that's interested, hey, get in touch with me and I'd love to set you up. Okay, so take care to everybody. But Kerry and I are going to continue with the conversation here with the chat room. So if you have any questions or comments, please put them in. Kerry's good at following along, but let's get through this.
Hey.
So what snake is historic?
So the northern pine snake is considered to be historic in Maryland. So there's historical records of it occurring on the eastern shore, but it hasn't been found in a long time. It's a more northern species.
By historic, do you mean like the longest recorded snake found in Maryland, or what do you mean?
Historic is a connotation we give for certain species that haven't been found in the state for a long time, but we haven't determined if they're extirpated or gone from the state entirely. Okay. So it's been a number of years since there have been records of the northern pine snake in Maryland. And there was some back and forth about whether it even existed in Maryland, but with some of the research with the Reptile and Amphibian Atlas, they found some credible evidence that it existed.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, thanks for defining historic too. That was great. Excellent. They feel totally equipped. The Hershey's Quick Kisses was really good. I appreciated the bow tie analogy. So that's great that you gave us two ways to look at it. Can some snakes swim underwater? I don't know which specific snake Regina is talking about, but are there any snakes that are both terrestrial and aquatic?
Yeah, so the northern water snakes can swim underwater, and they can also swim on top of water. So that's one thing. I took that photo out, but sometimes people confuse. There's a myth that water moccasins swim on top of the water, but water snakes can do the same thing too. Okay. So yeah, they're found both above and below.
Oh, great. Okay. Will there be a follow-up with this info? How do I get your email list for future presentations? So if you're talking to Agnes, hey, to get on that email list, you're automatically put in the branching out newsletter. So you're going to automatically get that unless you opt out. If you want to get in touch with me to find out more about my programming, akedmen@umd.edu, or you can reply to the email that Taylor's, our roadie, that Taylor's going to be sending out after this presentation. If you want to get in touch with Kerry Wixted, there's her information. And do you want to guide anywhere else so people can find out about you?
Yeah, check out the Wild Acres program. We have a public events page that has our webinar information. And so we have Bob Long, who is the upland game biologist for Maryland, speaking about bobwhite quail next week.
Great, great. So are these snakes hibernating right now? Are they under leaf litter? Are they other places? What are the snakes doing right at this moment, Kerry?
Yeah, snakes essentially are kind of going through snake-like hibernation. It's called brumation. So it depends on the species. Some of them are in communal dens, like the rattlesnakes usually are in communal dens, hibernacula, where there are multiples in there. Some species are individuals. So they might find under a log, under leaf litter, under a rock, those types of places. And they certainly can wake up on warm days. So when we have some warm winter days and it's enough to heat up that snake body temperature, some of them will become active. And I saw some photos just, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, you had that warm weather and there was somebody who got to see a hognose out and about. So yeah, they can sometimes move around.
Great. Somebody was asking if there was a phone number to call to report, or an email or a website. I went in there. So Kerry encouraged us to call the Department of Natural Resources customer service. So I put a link in there at 12:56, just to give you a little timestamp as to when I put a link in there for to contact customer service. There's several ways that you can do that according to the website. So I hope that helps you out there.
Thank you. And I see a private question from Frank about where rattlesnakes are found in Maryland. They're primarily found in Western Maryland, so in the mountain region of the state, although there was a recent record a couple years ago from Howard County. So if you look at the Maryland Biodiversity Project website, you'll find the counties, the distribution at county level where they're found, but we don't disclose the local level populations just because of the persecution and all of that.
Great, great. Well, that looks like the end of our questions. If anybody has a last minute question, I want to say that, Jim, hey, sometimes I feel historic too. Whether that's my age or whether that's, being home all the time. So, Kerry, we really appreciate your time. I do want to put a plug in for the both of us here now. You and I are partnering for an Earth Day presentation. We're doing, I'm organizing an Earth Day event with Maryland Master Naturalist volunteer, and we're doing a 2-week celebration, and it's going to be a scavenger hunt, photo scavenger hunt, where a week before Earth Day, we're going to have a presentation done by the bug guy. I don't know if you're familiar with the bug guy, Michael Roop. He's going to be doing a presentation for us a week before Earth Day. And then we're going to, on Earth Day, Kerry's going to come in and she's going to talk about the weird, wonderful, and wild Maryland diversity. Did I say that right, Kerry?
Yeah, the wild, weird, and wonderful Maryland's biodiversity.
Yes, so she's going to be presenting that on Earth Day. And after that, after Kerry's presentation, we're going to have a slideshow presentation of all the scavenger hunt clues that y'all gathered. And we're going to have a raffle draw too. So you can win some prizes on Earth Day, and you can join Kerry again. You can join Agnes, and then Taylor, our roadie, she's going to be there too. So we'll have that information for y'all once you get connected with Kerry or Agnes. You'll definitely get that. It'll come naturally. Any other last plugs or anything, Kerry, you want to?
No, I think hopefully you all appreciate snakes a little bit more, and feel free to reach out if you have any other wildlife questions or anything like that. So thank you again for the invitation.